Okay, I'd like to do a demonstration on making your own stamp and then printing that stamp onto some fabric. The first thing that I like to do is create a design for the stamp. So what I like to do is get my stamp that I'm going to use. This is just a piece of Speedball Easy Cut or Speedy Cut linoleum. It's just a very soft rubber or linoleum stamp that you can get. Cut it down to the size that you want. And then what I like to do is on just a regular piece of paper, I like to trace the stamp several times. Just move it over and trace it again. And give yourself, I don't know, as many as you like, at least 4 or 5, I would think. Up to 10 maybe, or more if you feel like it. And that way you can practice different designs and you know that each one is going to be the size of the stamp that you want. So I'm just going to do a very simple circular design. I'm not going to make you watch me try out 4 different designs. I'm just kind of making something up here as I go. Something like that. Kind of a circle with, I don't know what that is. I'm just making this up. All right, and once you get the design the way that you like it, you might go over the lines with your pencil to make sure that they're nice and dark, especially if you have drawn the design in kind of a sketch style where the lines are not very dark. It'd be a good idea to get those to be darker. Okay, I would say keep it simple. Keep your designs pretty simple. They don't need to be very complicated. All right, once I have my design, I'm gonna cut it out. And you know, again, I think it's really good to try a lot of different things. Play around with different design ideas. Don't just stick with the first one that you've come up with. I'm doing that because I'm doing a demo and I don't wanna make you watch me, you know, practice 5 or 6 designs. So, but you should do that. And I've done a lot of different designs and drawn out a lot of different designs. So it's not my first time doing this. Okay, so once I've got the design, then I'm ready to transfer the drawing onto my block. So I'm gonna take my drawing and I'm gonna put it face down on top of my block. One thing that I really like about this particular linoleum, the rubber, is that it is really easy to make a transfer onto. So I'm going to be really careful keeping the paper very still so that the paper doesn't shift around, and I'm going to go around the design. You can do this a couple different ways. You can do it with a pencil, and I can kind of see through the paper a little bit so I know where I need to do the transfer, and that's especially on a large drawing that you're transferring. This is a good way to do it because you don't necessarily have to scribble over the entire piece of paper. So I'm just kind of following where I see my design. And it's the pressure from the pencil is going to make the pressure from the pencil that I'm applying now is going to make the pencil of my drawing transfer onto the block. I'll show you what that looks like here in just a minute. All right, I'm going to be careful not to move it in case I need to do any more, but you can see how my drawing is now transferred onto the linoleum, okay? Once I've got it all on there, I think it's a really good idea to go over your design with Sharpie, and that way your design won't smudge off of the linoleum. If you just keep it in pencil, it's pretty likely that the design is just going to smudge off. So I'm just kind of going over this with Sharpie. Oh, my Sharpie is getting kind of dried out. And then what I like to do, I'm not going to do this whole thing. I'm trying to move fast for the demo. All right, but, well, might as well. It's not that complicated. Okay, and then, you know, you might also kind of do some work on the design. Like I want to make sure I don't carve out these areas. So that's really drying out. I'm gonna kind of scribble those in just as a reminder that I don't want to carve that area. So kind of do some of the thinking about what you're going to carve and what you're not going to carve with the Sharpie. My marker is dead. Okay, that's all right. Go over the whole thing in Sharpie, and now you're ready to carve. So I've got one of these carving tools. This is like a Speedball style. I think it's actually not Speedball brand, but it's similar to the style that Speedball is famous for. And I'm going to, it's got a bunch of these different bits in the base in the handle, and I'm gonna get out the small one. I like to start out with the small one and outline everything, and then go back in with one of the larger bits to get the big spaces out. So I've got a small bit, and what I'm gonna do is unscrew this thing here, unscrew the top part, and it might be kind of hard to see, but there's like a curved piece in there, and then the ball piece. So there's like a little curved plate and the ball. And what you want to do is you want to get the base, the wide part of the carving tool in between that curved plate and ball. If you don't get it in between there, then you can easily get this jammed in the top of the tool, and then it's really hard to get out. So what I have found is that it's easiest to do it like this, and you kind of just work it in there to loosen that up a little bit more. You might have to get it pretty loose, but make sure you don't get it all the way off. You might have to kind of sweet talk it in there a little bit. Come on. All right, pound it a little bit to get it to settle in, and then I'm gonna tighten that up. All right, that part can be a little bit tricky. Just be gentle and don't try to force anything. Just be patient with it. You'll get it in there. Okay, so now I'm ready to go. There's lots of different ways to hold your tool, but probably the number one rule with linoleum cutting is that you don't want to cut, you want to avoid it cutting towards your hand. So if I'm holding the tool or the stamp like this, I want to avoid going towards my hand, because if I slip, this is very sharp and it will take a chunk out of your finger. So you have to be careful about that. So I'm just gonna go along and carve out the areas that I want to stay white. Remember, all of the raised areas are going to be ink, and the parts that you cut out are going to be white, or the color of the paper. It's probably very difficult for you to see what I'm doing. What I like to do, and it's actually kind of hard for me to see what I'm doing as well, what I usually like to do is paint the surface of that red. And so what that does is it makes it really easy to see where I've cut and where I haven't. And so that's, I would recommend that. But you might not have red paint at home, and so it's perfectly fine just to carve it without the red paint. It's just kind of a visual, just kind of helps you visually. All right, so once you get everything carved out, I'm not gonna make you watch me carve that whole thing, then you have a stamp that you can use. And so the white areas have been carved out and these red areas are still raised. Here's another one that I made. That one, you can kind of still see some of the red paint there that I've washed off. And here's another one that I made. That's a shell. That one's pretty detailed. Okay, so once you have your stamp, you're ready to ink it up. When you're ready to ink it up, you're going to lay out some ink. I'm using this Speedball fabric ink, but there's lots of different inks that you can use. And actually, if you don't have proper printmaking ink, you can use acrylic paint or tempera paint. That works as well. I'm gonna just squeeze out a tiny bit. I don't need a lot. You can always add a little bit more ink, but once you get too much ink, then it's hard to go back. So go little by little. Don't put too much on at first. You're gonna make a huge mess. One of the things I've noticed about printmaking is that you're getting better at printmaking when you start to work cleaner. Okay, so I'm also not gonna just roll out all of that ink all over my my plate here. And by the way, I'm using a piece of plexiglass, but you could use a paper plate. Anything that's smooth and flat. Actually, paper plates are really nice because you just throw them away. You don't have to wash them later. But you need to have enough space that you can roll out some ink. Okay, what I'm going to pull down just a little bit of ink here. Just get a little bit on my brayer. And I'm going to pull it down, and I'm just going to get my brayer coated in ink. I try, if I can, I try really hard to keep the ink within about a square the width of my brayer. I don't want it all over the place. So keep it, try to keep it under control. Keep it, within this little space here. Then if you need a little bit more, you just pull down a little bit more. But you're gonna waste your ink if you spread it out all over the entire plate that you're inking on. All right, so, and I don't know if you can hear that sizzling noise, or that kind of noise. That is a good sound. That means you have about the right amount. You don't want too much. One of the common problems that I've seen is that people try to put too much on at once. That is a bad thing to do. So, because what's gonna happen if you put too much ink on at once is the ink's gonna get down into your carved out areas and it's gonna ruin your design. So what you really wanna do is put on 3 layers or more, 3 or 4 layers, I usually do 3 layers, of thin coat. So get the brayer coated and then start rolling out the ink. It's getting down into my carved areas a little bit. That's fine. That's called chatter when you have that, a little bit of kind of extra ink where you didn't necessarily want it, but that's okay. That's kind of the linoleum or wood block look. It has that. If you see other woodcut prints, you'll see that chatter a lot. All right, so I'm doing, that's my second coat. And I'm gonna do one more. I'm starting to need a little more ink down here, so just pull it down. You can always squeeze out a little bit more. Again, for the next time you ink it up, you're gonna need more ink, that's okay. Get that sizzle noise. Before you didn't really hear that sizzling noise and there wasn't enough ink there. You don't wanna hear nothing, because that means there's not enough ink, but you don't wanna hear like squelching noises, because that means there's too much. That's why you want the noises. A good indicator that you've got the right amount of ink. Okay. And I'm just gonna get that all coated. Might as well do one more coat and use up the rest of this ink. All right. Okay, and now I'm ready to make my print. So I'm just gonna move this out of the way a little bit. The brayers are made to be stored with the roller up so that you don't flatten the roller. So set that down like so, and I'm gonna get my paper, or I'm using fabric. I think it's a good idea to practice stamping. Practice on doing this on some other pieces of paper that you don't really care about, because actually I think one of the hardest things here is getting the right amount of ink. It took me a long time to figure out, to really get the hang of how much ink do I use. So practice that before you go on the fabric and end up ruining your finished piece. Okay, and I'm just gonna line this up and get it right where I want it. And then I like to stand up and print because I can put more weight down. I don't want to put my whole weight down on it. You don't want to push too hard, especially with this rubber stamp. You're going to squish it and then your design will get ruined. So you don't want to push too hard, but you want to push pretty hard. If you're not a very strong person, then maybe you do want to put all your strength into it. You just want to make sure you're not squishing the stamp. All right, make sure you go all the way around. I kind of do like a 4 corners kind of thing. And then maybe since this stamp's kind of big, I'll do the middle, maybe the 4 sides. I always try to have some kind of a system so I can repeat my results. Okay, and I've got that. You can see it's overhanging a little bit and stamping my plate. That's totally fine. And then I'm ready to see what this looks like. All right, pretty good. A little bit thin there. I probably could have used a little bit more ink there, but not bad at all. And that looks pretty good. So if you stamp out a whole piece of fabric that way, you can make a really interesting fabric design. And if you're using a fabric an ink that's really good for fabric, I recommend this Speedball is a good fabric ink. And you let it cure. Then you can wash this. You can make T-shirts this way. You know, you could carve a design into a stamp, ink it up, and print it onto a shirt. Make tote bags, aprons. I mean, all kinds of stuff. Okay, so that's it. And then of course you want to clean up. When you're cleaning up, it's a good idea to get a piece of scrap paper and just roll out your brayer and just kind of roll out any of the excess ink. The less ink you can put down the sink, the better. So just kind of roll this out. And that's going to get off a lot of the ink. And then same thing with this. You can just use a paper towel or whatever and try to wipe up as much of that as possible. Then you're going to want to wash it with warm water and dish soap. Dawn is a really good soap to use. That's what I use. Get a scrubber that you're not going to use for your dishes, or paper towels work just fine too. So warm water, a paper towel, or a scrubber sponge with some dish soap on there, and you'll get that ink off there no problem. Okay, and don't forget to wash your block as well. You don't want to let that ink sit there. Okay, so have fun. You can do all kinds of stamp designs. I think making stamps is a blast, and have fun with it. All right? Thanks.